going to take a look at Unit 7 soldering. To allow us to learn how to use the soldering iron properly, I've chosen a very simple design to make in lead glass. Right, it's a very good idea to have a look on Pinterest and on the internet, as there are many different designs that you can use for creating a nice hanger out of stained glass. They don't have to be accurate. It's going to be better if you just have some more fun. So there are my basic design for my drawing and the types of glass I'm going to use for it. So the next thing to do would be to go to the scrap glass box and find suitable glass for what you're making. Now, it's not always important that you have to match every one of these designs. If you find a curved piece of glass that's suitable or slightly longer, use it as it is. Just modify the drawing a little. This is not set in stone. You can vary it as you go along. And that's the ideal part of not having something that's perfect or symmetrical. Good, once we have selected all our different colors, we're going to have to draw the pattern that we're wanting on our glass. In cases where we cannot see through the glass, we will have to go along and actually draw the pattern on ourselves. To cut this out, we're going to be using a cutting mat which is fixed to a board. This one here, it's just some carpeting. And we're going to use a cutter. Now these cutters can be filled up with some kerosene, or we can have a tin with some kerosene and we basically just dip it into the kerosene to keep the tip wet. When we're going to cut this out, we're going to start off by cutting all our waste out. Now, when you're cutting, you place the point down, you press down fairly firmly, and it needs to make a nice crunchy sound all the way over. So, with firm pressure, cut it across, tap along your line and it will separate along the line, or you can give it a short soft little push or bend and it will break along the line. If you've cut complicated shapes, you might need to tap on it quite a bit. Once we have finished cutting the glass, our next exercise is to grind it so that all the sharp edges are taken off, so that the foil fits it nicely, and also that all the parts fit together. Here we have a whetstone grinder. It's important to make sure that there's some water in this section over here so that the stone stays wet while you're grinding. The water helps to keep the stone lubricated and your work nice and cool. If you used any other grinder, it would then cause your glass to crack. So what we're going to look at now would be grinding our work down. So we're first going to put some water, extra water into here. Now we've got the water in, we're going to switch it on. And I'm going to gently just work around all my edges so that I can grind down the glass so it's nice and smooth and it has a good shape to it. Now that we have ground all the glass, you will see that it will all fit together very nicely. At this point now you're going to have to make sure that your glass is nice and clean, because we're going to move on to our next step where we foil all the glass. Right, we're now ready to foil. So this is our foil. It's a copper foil, and you'll see that it's stuck onto a piece of paper. The back of it has a black sticky mixture on it that is used to stick onto the actual glass. It's very important that this connection is nice and clean and connected, as it will come loose later on if it's not. Now I'm going to put my foil onto my glass. I have to make sure that I'm exactly in the center. I'll start off at one point. I find it easier to have it flat on something and then just slowly roll it along, keeping to the center. I'm going to then push down on all the edges. I have a wooden dowel, and I use that just to make sure that all the edges are secured. I'm going to bring this tip around just a little and then break it off. Secure all of it. Now I'm going to push the foil in over the side. Push that down, secure it. Turn it over, do the other side. My first piece foiled, and I just continue to all my other pieces. Again, it's important to make sure you're starting in the center. Now, another suggestion that works well for the eyes is that rather than cut out an eye, we have glass beads, the flat beads, and they would work very well for eyes as well. Again, they'll just get a piece of foil around the middle edge. So here we have all the glass with the copper foil around it. So the next step in this process now would be to tin each individual piece. For that we're going to require a soldering iron and our lead solder and some flux. Over here we have our soldering iron. It's an 80-watt soldering iron. Gets nice and hot. You'll notice that the end of it's nice and silver. That's because before you operate any soldering iron you must make sure that the tip is tinned. This back end here you'll notice is nice and clear, shiny, no dark marks on it, and it's ready for use. So now I've gone along and I've put some solder onto my actual soldering iron, and if I come along and I touch the sides, you will notice that the solder sticks beautifully to the copper foil. Now this is very difficult to work with on one hand while I'm holding the GoPro, so I'm going to put the GoPro down and I'm going to go along and solder it. When you're doing small pieces like these, you need to make sure that you do a section of them and then put them down, as they can get very hot. If they get hot, leave them, come back to them later. So at this point I've now gone and tinned 5 of my pieces, and I'm going to put them in the order that I want them in so that they look correct. So here we go. Once you have your layout completed, all you need to do is go along and just tack it so that it will stay in its correct position. I want to just move this over a little so that that gap over there changes. That suits me. I'm happy with what I've got. I'm going to put some solder on and just carefully touch it where I would like it to join. Now once you start joining it, it starts becoming very difficult to change it, so make sure that you've got the right stuff in the right places. Once you've joined it, you can go over and make all your seams nice and smooth, turn it around and do the same on the opposite side. Here's a nice seam, smooth, it's got a bit of height to it, will give it some strength. Right, I've more or less got it stuck together as I want it. The next trick is I'm going to want to put wires in at the top section here and some feet on this bottom section. I'm going to use just mild steel wire for those, and I'll form them and solder. So what I've done now is I've joined all my pieces together, and I've also added on some whiskey bits for the top. Now it's very important to note that if you're going to be using wire, I've just used plain wire like this one over here. Drop that on the floor, like this piece of wire over here, and most of these bits of wire would be coated with some form of zinc coating. Before we can work with this, we need to make sure that we sandpaper it so that we can get the flux to adhere to it and get the solder to adhere to it. Once we have cleaned it, we can then add it in by just adding extra solder to the top. Likewise, I've done the same with the tail. I added 2 little wisps onto the tail. I've also done 2 feet. So they're the feet. I will add them in on the bottom, something like that, and I can bend and trim it once it is on. You do need to make sure that you get a good connection just on the bottom over here so that it's nice and solid. So the next step would be to trim those up and to fit them. Over here I have my 2 feet. I've gone and I've cut them to about the same length, and I've sanded the top tips of these down so that I can add some flux to it. And the first thing I'm going to do would be to just get some solder to stick to that before trying to get it to adhere to the bottom of my crazy bird. So I'm going to stick them on down here, and we'll do that step next. And the last thing is to add some character to the eyes, so we'll put some little dots into the eye that we can make black later on. Use some foil, cut some circles, put them on there, and lead solder each eye. Right, so we've added in the eyes. The next step we're going to do is to wash it nice and clean, and we're going to use some of this. It is black patina, okay, for solder. It will give it all a nice black aged look. So now we take the patina and we brush it on over all of our metal work, and you'll notice that it's all changed black. And what we're going to do next will just be to wash it clean, and we'll be finished. Right, here's what we have. You'll see how the colors stand out much better once we've put some black on it, the patina. It makes a world of difference. Here we have the final product.